I'm putting my ego aside because this is going to benefit all of us.
Is the biggest draw in influencer boxing quitting forever? Jake Paul is 6-0 in his professional fights so far and is generally regarded as the top dog right now.
Jake Paul just put Tyron Woodley in airplane mode.
But he may have set his sights on something bigger. To get there, he'll have to squash some incredibly serious beef with an incredibly powerful man. You see, Jake has always had strong words to say against the UFC.
I see how fighters are mistreated and how much money they have to spend on their own camps.
And in particular, UFC President Dana White.
We're tired of you treating fighters like this.
You greedy bald.
But 1 year ago, Jake was willing to put all of that behind him, quit boxing, and sign a mega UFC contract. And he wanted to fight Jorge Masvidal, one of the biggest names in the sport. However, there were not just one or even two, but three massive conditions Jake put on the table. First, Dana had to increase minimum pay per fight to $50,000, up from $12,000. He also had to guarantee UFC fighters 50% of its annual UFC revenue, which was $1 billion in 2021. And finally, he had to provide long-term healthcare programs to all fighters, especially when it comes to brain damage.
People think like, oh, he hates them. He hates the UFC. No, I love the UFC. I'm a fan of the UFC. Now that they are like the NFL and they're still only paying their fighters, 15% of the total revenue and not giving them long-term healthcare, that's where the issue comes in for me.
Now here we are a year later and not much has changed, but Jake just dropped a vague tweet in which could have major implications for the sport. On January 1st, he wrote, "Happy New Year's to all MMA fighters and fans. 1 year ago today, I started my mission to bring awareness and change to the sport's pay and benefits. I've used my platform to consistently amplify this message. Now it's time to not just amplify, but to implement change. January is going to be head exploding emoji." I'm pretty sure he also said you should explode that subscribe button by smashing it. It must have just got cut off on the bottom of the tweet. So according to Jake, the time for talk is over and the time for action is now.
I care about fighters and I'm trying to change combat sports in general as a part of my legacy and a part of, contributing back to combat sports that saved my life.
So something big is coming very, very soon. This month, in fact. But what exactly is it going to look like? Has Dana White finally agreed to Jake's terms?
No, you moron.
Back in January of last year, Jake gave him a deadline of just 5 days to agree and said that all the changes needed to be implemented by March 31st. Well, that never happened, but maybe Jake has generously given him an extension on that deadline. Perhaps a fight with, as Jake calls him, weak chin Jorge is still gonna happen? Or could something more drastic be happening? Like, what if Jake wants to create his own MMA company? And what if he starts to try and lure the fighters from the UFC over with better healthcare benefits and better pay? That would be pretty wild, although Jake has started his fair share of beef with UFC stars.
Masvidal and Nate Diaz, y'all are some for leaving this arena.
So they might not suddenly want to make friends of him now. The most likely option is Jake is teaming up with UFC legend Anderson Silva to create an association to help MMA fighters. Before their recent boxing match, Jake placed a bet with Anderson.
If you win, I will fight you in an MMA fight. But if I win, me and you come together to create a United Fighters Association to help UFC fighters get better pay and better healthcare.
Deal.
Wow. Let's go.
Now back in October, Jake knocked down Silva in the final round and won by unanimous decision.
Still undefeated, the problem child, Jake Paul.
And then Jake went on the MMA Hour podcast and revealed he thought Anderson Silva was a man of his word and that they are talking to lawyers to set everything up.
This is been needed for so long. I'm putting my ego aside because this is going to benefit all of us.
So is it finally happening? And if so, how much is this going to shake up the UFC and how Dana White is running things? We're very excited to see what happens next.